guys, it's Q. Thanks for joining us here at the Thoughts for Living podcast, where information is thoughtful and engaging. It's this week's episode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us again on the Thoughts for Living podcast. We would like for you to go to our website, thoughtsforliving.com, and there you can find not only information about this podcast, but also about other podcasts that we've previously recorded. Also, on the website, we'd like for you to take a look at our new children's book, We Are Humankind. Currently, the book is still practically free. You just have to pay shipping. And we know that this book will be a wonderful addition to your child's library. Also at thoughtsforliving.com. Please check out the music that we have there. And as always, we thank you in advance for your support. In this series of episodes, we've provided an overview of ecological consciousness theory. We've shared that there are two basic value systems that help shape how humankind sees and relates to the ecological context in which we live. The first comes from our African ancestors, who learned to value the group, collaboration, spirituality, and personhood. The second evolved out of the 17th century Enlightenment period, when European white males revolted against feudalism and the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, and as a result, promoted the rights of the individual, competition, secular idolatry, and personal achievement at all costs. In today's episode, we will contrast personhood and personal achievement. Personhood is simply being a good person. Well, what is a good person? And who decides who's a good person? Well, I'm glad you asked. Ecological consciousness theory suggests that our African foreparents thought that being a good person meant demonstrating choices and attitudes that enhanced the group's development and safety. Behaving in ways that supported group cohesion and obtaining their basic needs was fundamental to their sustainability. This would represent a good person. On the other hand, decisions and actions that put the group at risk were not only frowned upon, but over time became taboo or wrong. Thus, our African ancestors taught us that killing and stealing or imperiling group members by attracting predators or disrupting the ecological balance was associated with bad behavior that was prohibited by the group. This describes a bad person. In short, the meaning of personhood is demonstrated by how we treat others and how we treat the ecological context through conforming to a loving social order. Personhood, being a good person, is the outcome of an ecological consciousness that views life as an interrelated, symbiotic network in which personal decisions and actions influence social relationships and the biosphere. Now let's contrast that with the Eurocentric view of personal achievement at all costs. Now, this is a value that results from prioritizing individualism, competition, and idolatry, which forms a worldview that sees life as disconnected, compartmentalized, and atomistic, with little or no regard for how one's choices and behaviors may negatively impact or affect others or the environment. Furthermore, This perspective overemphasizes numbers and quantitative approaches to knowledge interpretation and so-called validity. This perspective de-emphasizes the importance of people's narratives and stories about their lived experiences that help us to better understand what it means to be womankind. Relative to personal achievement, many are only concerned with numbers that say how much we make, or how much we have, or how much we spend, and the zip code that we live in. Because for those who embrace this worldview, the meaningfulness of life is based solely on acquiring status, acquiring things, acquiring possessions. Having the big house, the expensive cars, the private schools, and the six-figure salaries in this society is taught to mean that what you possess shows you are a good person and worthy of respect, even if those possessions were stolen or acquired through extraction processes that directly or indirectly poison people, the water, the land, and the air. To sum it up, values are taught and learned in informal and formal learning spaces like homes and schools and places of worship. What we value shapes how we see our world and how we see our sisters and brothers. Education in so-called traditionally oral cultures promote a more we perspective, whereas in so-called literate societies, education promotes a more I perspective. Afrocentric perspectives value the importance of being good people. You know, my mother never really thought it was important what vocation or what job I had, whether I was a teacher or a musician or a custodian. My parents first wanted me to be a good person, like most of you all. But on the other hand, a Eurocentric view of life results in people striving not to be good people, but to have status. In other words, an Afrocentric value system recognizes the importance of education that develops character, as opposed to the Eurocentric ideas that sees quality education as a means to cash. Who you become versus what you become is the basic difference between an Afrocentric value system and a Eurocentric value system. One believes in personhood, being a good person. The other believes in personal achievement at all costs. Again, we'd like to thank you for joining us here at the Thoughts for Living podcast. And as always, we wish you a great rest of your week.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us this week on this episode. Please reach out to us if you have any questions at thoughtsforliving.com. See you next week.